Welcome to AskReddit Stories, where I bring you the most amazing stories from all of Reddit. Today's question is, people who have found a dead body, what's the story? Story number 1. I arrived at work early one morning and went into the men's locker room. Lying dead on the floor was a man. I didn't recognize him at first because his head was so swollen from where it hit the ceramic tile floor. Apparently, though only in his 40s, he had suffered a massive heart attack and collapsed to the floor after just having taken a shower in the adjoining shower room. Looking at him more, I realized who it was, a longtime employee who was very well liked and admired. When the realization set in, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Story number 2. My dad, my friend, our Labrador Retriever and I were duck hunting and camping out for the weekend near a large bay of water. We were walking on the beach the second night when we stumbled upon a man's body, fully clad in a winter coat, pants, and one Reebok pump shoe. It was obvious he had been dead for some time, so it was hard to tell exactly how old he was. After we got back to the mainland, we called the police from a tiny gas station and they came out and had us take them out to where we found the body. Turns out he had been missing for over 2 weeks. They were later able to determine his identity and that he had disappeared while on a walk with his wife one night about 10 miles away from where he was discovered. Foul play was suspected by many, but as far as I know, no arrests were ever made. Story number 3. I was in a multi-story shopping mall with my mother and we suddenly heard an enormous crash. We didn't mind it at first. A few minutes later, we saw there were lots of people gathering around the fence that led to an interior courtyard, so we approached it to see what the fuss was about. When we looked down there, we saw a body already covered with a plastic bag. Turns out, an employee of the mall had jumped from the glass ceiling. Story number 4. I was delivering a fruit/flower arrangement to a house and the recipient wasn't answering the door. I peeked through the window on the door and saw an adult male on the floor next to his couch. His entire body was purple. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I called 911, an ambulance and a police car showed up, and they both confirmed he was dead. This was my first experience with a dead body, and I was a little freaked out to say the least. A few detectives asked me some questions as I sat on the ground next to the delivery truck. I was shaking the whole time. The best part? I was at the wrong address. The arrangement was meant for this guy's neighbor. Story number 5. 3 of us pulled up to an acquaintance's house to pick up a set of speakers. His dog was outside and ran to greet us, and eventually we realized it was trying to lead us to him. We waited outside for a while and the guy wasn't coming out. So we went in, found him face down at the table, overdosed. Story number 6. Earlier this year, Easter to be exact, I found my 7.5-week-old daughter dead in her crib. We still have no idea what happened. I theorized that she suffocated on her blanket, but the autopsy didn't reveal anything. It was the worst day of my life without a doubt. She was cold, scary cold. You could tell just by how pale she looked. The lack of any response to movement or noise was eerie and indescribably heartbreaking. Story number 7. My grandma collapsed in the hallway of our house when I was in high school. She would always wake me and my brother up for school, so when I woke up at 9:30 one day, I knew something was up. I got dressed and stepped out of my room just to find my grandma passed out on the floor. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Story number 8. About 15 years ago, my father and I, who were both volunteer firefighters in our town, responded to a car accident scene. We were the first ones there since it was close to our house and the car was abandoned. It all seemed strange until we walked around to the back of the car and noticed a reddish-brown liquid oozing from the trunk. Thinking that someone could be hurt in there, we opened it and found 2 large garbage bags full of the most vile-smelling, puke-inducing substance we had ever witnessed. Come to find out later that the driver of the car killed his wife, put her through a wood chipper, and collected as much of the remains as he could into those bags. He was later found and arrested. The image of those 2 bags has never left my mind, and I think about it almost every day. It still makes me shiver. Story number 9. My son had just returned home from 13 years of active military duty. One morning, I went to wake him for breakfast, and he was not responsive. I turned him over and started CPR. I yelled for his wife to call 911 and kept working on him for the 15 minutes it took for the EMTs to arrive. They took over for another 15 to 20 minutes before transporting him to a hospital where he was declared dead. My heart is broken. My 2-year-old granddaughter can't understand why Daddy doesn't come back. He was one of the most honorable men I have ever known. I miss him terribly. Story number 10. I was doing an unpaid internship and had no money, so I lived in a house with 3 roommates. The first one was cool, but the other guy we never really saw. He just did his own thing. We invited him to hang out all the time, but he never wanted to. One day we realized that we hadn't seen him in a week, which was a little longer than usual. We went upstairs where his room was and noticed a horrible smell. We check his room and see him sprawled over the floor, dead. Story number 11. One night, as I was leaving the late shift at work, I found myself crossing a dimly lit parking lot. In the eerie silence, I noticed a car with its engine still running. Upon closer inspection, I saw a man slumped over in the driver's seat. He looked extremely pale. I knocked on the driver's side window to try and wake him, but he was unresponsive. I called 911 and paramedics later confirmed it was an overdose. Story number 12. This was about 25 years ago when I was 5. Me and my friend were playing outside, and through the ventilation hole from our neighbor's basement, we saw a body. Upon close inspection, we realized it was an older boy, around 18 years old, who had hung himself. I will never forget that image, and I can only be grateful for his face being turned the other way. Story number 13. I found my wife dead on the floor. Our son was just 2.5 months old. My wife Jill was still on maternity leave. I come home and hear our dog barking his head off outside. I think, that's strange, he should be inside by now. Opening the front door, I hear our son crying upstairs. Other than that, the house is silent. I call out, "Jill, where are you?" Then I see her laying on her back in the living room. She's cold. I call 911 and start CPR. Yes, I knew that it was pointless, but I had to do something. The police officer arrives and gently tells me to stop. She tells me to take care of my son. Jill died about half an hour after I went to work. She went downstairs and started boiling water for the baby formula. She went into the living room to pick up a book and fell over dead from heart arrhythmia. Fortunately, the house didn't burn down, or my son would have died too. It was by far the worst day of my life. Things are better now, but it really sucks to come home to find that. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more, consider subscribing. Also, check out the music used in this video in the pinned comment or in the description. See you next time.